Okay, hello to all again. So we're continuing the discussion on eSport, and we're having a very nice panel and discussion here about how eSport is going on mobile. We will try to speak mostly on the mobile market. So maybe, gentlemen, you will introduce yourself, each of you. I know some of you. I've listened to Max's presentation. So Simon, you start. Just tell us what you're doing and your position regarding esports activities on mobile.
Okay, so I'm head of design at Nitro Games. So obviously, esports is something that I need to basically be on track with, and it's an interesting topic. So I've also researched a little bit, and then it's something that, as a company, we're obviously interested in seeing where it goes. So. Okay,
so game design and game developer. Yuri.
Yes. So yes, my name is Yuri Yuskevich. I am director of community and esports at Critical Force, and we do a mobile FPS game. We also have a very vibrant competitive scene which is growing very, very rapidly, and definitely it's our tool of engaging and marketing our game as well. So definitely very, very close to my heart.
So you will have the community management point.
Oh yes. And of course, tournament organizing point as well. We work with a lot of partners and also have a lot of success facilitating community tournaments, which I think are super important for grassroots level growth.
Max, you just talked for a while just before that. But
yeah, for those of you who were not here, my name is Max and I'm a researcher at the University of Tampere. I research both esports and streaming, kind of the psychological points of why people consume those. Previously, I've also played games professionally, so I have that as a background as well as playing games.
Which game?
I played Magic the Gathering.
Oh, really?
So not a digital game, but actual physical paper.
It's coming back out on digital now, isn't it, though?
Yeah, something like that.
Right. So I'm Chris Cataldi. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of a company called GenVid Technologies. We specialize in broadcast technology for esports. So if you've probably seen VentureBeat has written a couple articles about us. I used to run a company called Shinra Technologies, which was the cloud gaming arm of Square Enix. And we're very much focused on cloud-deployed tools that can make game streams interactive. Up until now, you're watching people talk about games, and the developers have been engaging influencers. From now, you'll be seeing a lot more interactivity on sites like Twitch and YouTube itself. And so we work with the platforms, we work with the developers, we work with the teams, and we work with the broadcasters. And that's kind of my focus here today.
Thank you very much. So the idea was to have to start with an overview of the eSport market for mobile. I don't know if we have a conference on this before that, but it will be interesting to have some figures maybe on and know how good the state of the art of eSport on mobile now. Is it growing? Is it big? Max, you are the researcher. How eSport is doing on the mobile market?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any strict figures on esports versus, mobile versus non-mobile. I just know, like, from the watching aspect, for example, Twitch is being watched like more and more from different types of devices than just pure PC. So that's mobile. That also includes consoles and so on. But I think just the fact of being able to watch Twitch wherever you go is a big kind of selling point. You can, if you're watching a tournament at home, and you need to go cook dinner, you can grab your phone and watch it. I know I've done it myself, so.
Yeah, I think the most recent figures are 35% of people who watch Twitch are watching on their mobile device at any given time, so it's definitely...
No, they're watching on mobile, but are they watching mobile games?
Not yet. I mean, it really does... when you compare it to PC or even console, mobile is still quite nascent, I'd say. You do have, I think, the place that gets the most kind of talking, I guess, is Super Evil Megacorp with Vainglory. Obviously, you've got Critical Force. You've got a whole bunch of other games. You've got Clash. You've got...
Maybe we can... which are the 5 biggest esport games on mobile now? We have Clash Royale. Hearthstone
you've
is
got
Hearthstone
Clash.
a mobile game for you?
You've got Clash, you've got obviously Vainglory. In terms of esports, whether or not it's player-based is a different story, but in terms of what gets the most ink and what's the most airtime, I think Vainglory is definitely there. It has professional teams in there as well, which I think, as you were saying in your talk, is one of the bigger kind of focal points of media. Where else would you say is a...
I'd also say like Hearthstone. You can play, like, I mean, it's kind of a hybrid, and if you look at the actual tournament, sure, people are mostly playing on either computers or some kind of this tablet setup, but like you can access the actual same functionalities on the mobile as you can on a desktop. So I think it's definitely worth mentioning.
I think that in general, it's kind of the same problem, not just for mobile games, but for a lot of PC games and console games as well. The market is being dominated by very few games which have developed their competitive scene over many years. So what nowadays the publishers and game developers try to do when they enter the space is they try to throw in money and expect results very, very fast, which doesn't exactly translate into viewers or engaged fans of the game. You really do need to put in effort. The League of Legends didn't become the huge mega hit the first year it got released. I remember watching their first World Finals. I talked to the guys that tried, and I was like, it looked like you did the whole thing in the garage. They were like, yeah, we did that. So nowadays, I think people really try to get results too fast, expect just throwing money will bring them views, which really doesn't. So no stamina, that's what I say.
On that note, what do you think about the fact that, like, as an esport, if you don't throw the money in, where do the players come from? Is that something that just happens, like people pick it up as a hobby and then start playing it professionally? Or, for example, like Clash Royale throwing in like 1 million on a tournament, I imagine that, you know, attracts a lot of people and actual competitors.
Competitors, yes, but I don't think that viewers really care if it's 100,000 or if it's 1 million. You're not going to get the money. Of course, it makes really, really big news titles, so you do get media attention. That's what, for example, Vainglory is doing. They're putting a lot of effort into attracting the teams, paying the teams, running really big production events. I think that definitely you need to spend money, but how you spend money and to what you spend money, because, for example, how we're spending it on micro tournaments and engaging as many people as possible inside our community so that as many people as possible would have the feeling of success. They have won. It doesn't matter that they never faced Fnatic, for example, but they beat that guy that they go to school with, for example, or they've been playing some other games in a clan war or something. And then from there, you get the professional teams, and then there you get the kind of expansion, or at least that's our vision.
What I understand from what you're saying that the eSports scene is now quite old. It's nearly 15 years old, but it's been going on PC. But for the mobile market to get into eSports, you need to put lots of money. And that's what Tencent is doing with Arena of Valor. Sure. That's right. Super Evil Megacorps with Vainglory. But is it possible for smaller company to get as big as those giants? I don't think that Valve puts any money into bringing Counter-Strike into eSport. It just made itself because so many people were playing. So, but of course, they started 20 years ago, and nearly 20 years ago. So the mobile market is much more younger, and now it's facing a huge eSport scene where the opportunities are much more difficult, and the players market are more difficult to get in. But they have to do that. So, what is the good recipe to get into this eSport market, and how you as a game developer? Well, Yuri, you have explained already in your previous talk what you are doing for the community, setting up tournaments, and so on. What other things have to be done to get into this difficult market?
I'll give the mic in just a second. But one of the things, I think that cooperation between various mobile titles, because there aren't that many of us who make games which are meant for gamers and not to strip as much money out of the player as possible. So just banding together and doing events, because then we can bring fans from different games, we can learn from each other, and also a lot of the titles we don't even compete for the audience. So there's that, and then also engaging brands and making us more interesting to the bigger brands, which then again bring visibility, just as you said in your own presentation, and also the money. So there.
If I can put my opinion here, I think it's not an example of mobile, but PUBG, when it came out, shows that with a very short amount of time, if you build the right kind of game for the viewership and for the player base, player-known Battlegrounds, which is last month the #1 streamed game on Twitch. It's, again, not an example of a mobile game, but it does show where tech and game design and kind of knowing your player base and also your viewer base can come together and overnight take down games that are pretty much entrenched and the most popular, right? So to your question, can mobile get there? I think to Yuri's point as well, it's a matter of creating a broadcast and creating a viewership experience that is better than anything that's come before. That's also not necessarily just expecting influencers to rebroadcast what they're doing. The mobile streaming experience for a broadcaster is the hardest there is, right? Because the tools you have are limited. In your presentation, you were showing even what PC broadcasters have. The tools there are still very, they range from super basic to a little bit more professional, but the learning curve, the experience curve required to have something professional on even PC is very, very steep. And so imagine what that means for mobile, right? So I think what we're going to see is, in terms of the first truly inclusive or expansive mobile esport, is going to be a game that allows for an amazing viewership experience that doesn't necessitate a expert streamer on the mobile side that can do all those things together. So when we work with mobile developers in this space, they're very cognizant of that fact, and I think you're going to see that soon. Just again, look at where we are today versus 10 years ago for mobile games in terms of smartphone. We are catching up fairly quickly to the rest of the gaming market, and I think esports is going to be no exception there.
Battleground is a very good example, but it's a very successful game. But is it an esport game? Not yet. There's no competition for the moment. They are starting to do. They have just started to do competition, but it's more complicated. They have to build the esport scene, build the tournaments, build the rules. But of course, with such an audience, 10 million or 12 million games sold so far in a few months, they're starting from a big base. Max?
Yeah, I was just going to comment on that. I mean, it's an excellent point that I think the technical aspects are also limiting both kind of the broadcasting and the content creation for YouTube as well. If you think about, all these most successful broadcasters, they have like a really professional setup. They have lighting, they have professional microphones, they have sometimes like multiple cameras. They're not using your 50-euro USB webcam. They're using like a DSLR on a tripod to capture. And they're using like a minimum of 2 screens. Some have like 6 screens. I'm not even sure what they put on all those. But like when you see those studio setups, they're like really professional. And now imagine that just like using your phone. Sure, you can use the front-facing camera and whatever, but it's not going to be the same, especially like even though phones are really good these days, like having the technical aspects correct to broadcast is not a simple thing. So I think yeah, that's definitely one thing worth
That's a limit for esports on mobile, you think?
I think like if we think about just like the current way esports is being broadcast, or esports game, not necessarily the tournaments. Like if you look at League of Legends on Twitch, some pros are practicing. It's fairly easy for them to broadcast, but it gets much harder when you have to broadcast from your phone and then like actually conveying that to the viewer.
Well, if we take the example of Counter-Strike, when you look at Counter-Strike competition, they are talking to each other, they're doing lots of gestures, you have all the 5 players against the other 5, and they're trashing the other guys, and it's part of the interest of the competition. But is it possible, for example, on Critical Force, if the guy are just playing on their phone, how they will interact, how will you stage the competition?
Oh, definitely. People use, some people use, for example, Discord on the same phone. The more professional guys would have a second device so that they can run Discord on one device and then play on the other one. In regards to the ease of creation of content, well, we had very good success in that. I mean, Vainglory has now 650,000 videos made of them on YouTube. We have 1.2 million in just under 2 years. So people do know how to use mobile devices to create content. They also, of course, if they want to add camera, they probably will be using PC and they will be doing the setups anyway. The guys that want to get good, they will get good and they will get the necessary stuff. But of course, for the small guys which are just starting out, quite often the tools provided inside the phone or mobile device are quite sufficient to create the beginning content. You need to start somewhere. You don't need to be PewDiePie when you start streaming or making videos.
And do you develop an esport game at Nitro? Do you have one?
I'm not sure if anyone is going to say that you can actually develop an esport game. We do a competitive multiplayer, so I'm not saying that we don't do that at some point, but obviously as of now, you can't just say that, hey, this is an esport, and it doesn't happen like that, at least in my opinion. This is at the moment going a lot on like how you view esports and how you stream esports, which still requires like a third device, basically like a PC or something to actually get your content out of your phone. But at the moment, at least like in 2016, I think 30% of the prize money on esports went on mobile. So it's already like an established thing. So esports is coming to mobile, that's for sure. But how and in at what kind of capacity, I guess, is the big question. As far as I know, the Street Fighter is now coming as well on mobile, which is interesting because that's the first version where you actually have an established PC console game that is now coming into like a native mobile app, and that's something at least I'm looking forward to seeing how that works out.
So about the evolution of esport on mobile, do you think we have to wait for the really big publishers to set up some very large events? And is it a place for middle publishers or small developers to create some new product, new tournament events?
Well, I think that I'm not very comfortable with that because it's very always vague that what is esports and when you are an esports title. Do you need to book your first stadium and fill it with 60,000 people to be an esports title? I like to think, at least when I'm doing my work and we're supporting our players, that just like with football, if there are a few guys kicking the ball around, they're doing sports already. So if there are people playing your game and then they're making competitions and they're trying to beat each other, even if it's a single-player game, you can call it a sport, you can call it an e-sport, and you can throw rocks at me right now for saying that. But is it going to be a large title? Is it going to attract masses? You will figure it out later as well. It depends on the game, depends on the community, depends on how you handle the community. Will you actually allow the time for the community to grow and expand? So I think that you guys are starting to do esport, even though you just don't want to admit it and say it. Competitive game, that's what we call ourselves as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the only difference between a competitive game and an esport is whether or not they're professionals there, and there's actually value enough for the broadcast for sponsors to come on board and for there to be a competition there, right? I mean, in terms of nomenclature, to your question, can mobile get there? I think absolutely. It's just a matter of time. When people say that Counter-Strike is very easy to watch, I as a former competitive Counter-Strike player, not professional competitive, what I'll say is it's like American football. We grew up with it to a certain extent, so the people who are watching have, again, a lot of experience watching. If people picked it up for the first time and watched it without any context, I think Counter-Strike is probably not the easiest to watch, but we just like American football in America, we grew up with it, so it's there. Mobile games, for the most part, the lifetime of the game itself doesn't lend itself to a 20-year live game, right? So, and smartphones haven't been around that long, right? So it's just a question of are games going to and mobile games going to be long enough to be organic, where the community comes around and makes an esport around it, or is it going to have to be a little bit more top heavy, where you call it either it's a marketing ploy from the developer's side, or it's kind of a mix. In terms of the technology is definitely there, the audience is definitely there. It's just a matter of time and the right mix, and I think it'll happen sooner than people expect it to.
We know that esport is a kind of marketing word for selling more games, but in fact it's true. We've been playing competitive game for years before esport even appeared, but now for very large publishers, esport is a way to say that everybody can get into the game and to bring more people and to have large stadium playing. But can we have esport competition on casual game? Is it possible to imagine that we have tournaments and broadcast tournament on the more casual audience, that the mass of people playing on mobile games, or is it reserved to complex game, very competitive game?
Well, I was just going to mention something about the casual games, and when you asked earlier, like, is there room for smaller companies to come? I would say yes and no. No, because esports is getting into that point. Like if you're talking about the big esports, Counter-Strike and so on, there's a lot of money there. Like in the Overwatch League, you had to pay $20 million to get a team spot. And then like just now, yesterday, there was this news about the Envy Us team getting like a $35 million investment and relocating. That's a lot of money compared to like some years ago when a player's salary of like $1,000 a month was like really good. But I think, on the other hand, you see a lot of like the surprising plays coming from different studios. You mentioned PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, just coming from, of course, like people who perhaps knew it was coming were not surprised, but for general public, they were really surprised. Like, what's this game? Why is it so popular? And something like Rocket League, which is inherently quite a casual game, you could of course play it competitively. So I mean, yes, for sure, like casual games have potential for being esports. You don't have to be this super complex MOBA with like all these talent trees, items, and so on that you have to like data mine, optimize, and theory craft. You can have a little bit of simpler game, which is fun to watch and fun to play, and that can be very successful. I mean, I don't have a recipe for how you should make one, but
I'll put my opinion here, as I'm up to do. To your question on esports, can it be casual? I think you'll get some pushback from the core players who, even today, are the core demographic of viewers. If you wanted to talk about broadcasting games and having large viewership, I think there's absolutely potential for that. Look at any game show, look at anything where contestants can come on and have some sort of star experience, and that people can watch that, right? Whether it's, we're in a space now where you're going to have these interactive, even cloud-based experiences where people are going to come on and millions of people will watch them, and you can have all kinds of prize pools. Again, look at any game show, and that's definitely possible. It's just a matter of drawing viewership. But I don't think most people would consider that an esport, but you could definitely have a game that is viewed by large audiences, that is sponsor-friendly, that is mobile-friendly, and again, that you're going to see that more often. Probably you're going to see that before you see a casual.
Anyway, as you say, you do not develop a game and saying it's going to be an esport game. You develop a competitive game and you start to create an esport team around it if people are interested to join competition.
I so disagree with your vision of what esports game is, but yeah. I mean, I still think that you don't need to have a professional team with salaries to be called an esport. I mean, like maybe like there is a guidebook, and then I just didn't read it. But the other thing. I think that there is a lot of pushback always from the hardcore players to whatever you do. Just think about Dota 2 and League of Legends, and how, just go and ask Dota 2 if League of Legends is an esports game, and how do they feel about the complexity of League of Legends. I think that as long as there is a large enough learning curve for you to get better it's enough. And actually the easier and the smaller the barrier of entry, the better. Because trying to learn how to play Dota 2, I don't want to do that. Also, I think that a lot of problems attracting larger audiences exactly come from complexity. One thing which I don't like about Vainglory, I love the game, played it a lot on my free time, but one thing, why do you have last hitting in the mobile game, for example? It makes very, very counterintuitive, well, it makes you do a lot of counterintuitive things from the player perspective that doesn't have the MOBA experience. Like, you see the opponent champion at level 1, but you're not supposed to hit him because you will die. But for the person who hasn't been in the Dota 2, in the League world, they don't know that. I mean, that's why maybe I like playing Vainglory so much, I always won.
But then again, at the same point, like when you watch football, you'd think like, hey, if you just pick that ball in your hands and run, you'd win, right? So there's always that level of knowledge you have to have about the game. And in Dota, I guess it's easy that the games are so long and there's these lulls in the game where there's analysts and everything explaining how the game works, even to people who aren't playing it. So they have that opportunity where they can actually basically explain how the game works and get players playing the game. Like people who don't know how the game plays might actually have an idea how it works after they watched a couple of streams. But I feel like you're not going to agree with this either.
Max,
just one comment. I mean, I wouldn't compare Dota 2 to football or soccer. I would compare it to cricket. Now, there's more fair comparison, I think.
Yeah, I think when we're talking about complexity and broadcasting, I think what the guy who's done the eSports production at Yle, the Finnish national broadcaster, when they broadcast Counter-Strike on actual TV, not just like online, but on actual television, he said that if you're a Counter-Strike player, they're not producing the content for you, they're producing it for your dad. So, I mean, of course, Counter-Strike is a complex game. The people who are good at it are really, really good. I could never do what they do, but it's a very simple concept of this like good guy, bad guy, cops and robbers. Like people who have watched any action movie ever know kind of people are shooting at each other. If you're not the one that's bleeding, it's probably a good thing. So I mean that kind of tells us something about like when you're selling esports to a general audience, like how does the complexity work? There's always like a spectrum of the hardcore, but also being able to watch it as a true like newcomer. Something like Counter-Strike works just because the concept is simple, even though you don't understand the strategy and tactics of it.
So, to conclude, for mobile developers, if they want to go into the esport, even if you say that you do not decide your game is esport, but you want to have as much audience possible and you want to have as much people play your game, so you want to have your game competitively played with tournaments. Do they have to do the same thing that the PC developers have done for the last 10 years? Or do they have to have a different approach? What would be the good approach for mobile developers to get into esports? Would they have to set up some very big tournaments and try to be on TV? Or do they have to get a more casual audience with ranking into the game? Or is there an esport culture that mobile developer could develop? It's a difficult question, I know, but we have to conclude.
Yeah, I mean, all I'll say is I think each platform has its unique attributes, and they have to really leverage those to be successful, and not necessarily just parrot what broadcast on television does and broadcast on online what PC does. But I do think that one thing that mobile games and competitive and esports, call it what you will, need to do going forward is think about the spectator experience and probably build a spectator mode. Not to your point, not all PC games have this necessarily, and definitely not all mobile games have this. So if you want people to watch the game, the spectator experience is really important, and the game has to support that to a very high level, I think, as well.
I think there's room to be brave. Don't just like copy like MOBAs and FPS, but think about like what other genres could there be. Like currently when we're looking at esports, when we say esports, a lot of people just think about those two, like maybe Hearthstone, so maybe card games, FPS, and then like MOBA. So that would be the same as like all sports is just like ice hockey and football. That is not the case. If you look at the Olympics, there's like a million different things going on there. So maybe like, try to make a competitive Connect trigger or something. I don't know how that would work, but like that's just an idea. Or something like that, something that if you are like looking to develop that like mobile that's kind of yours and not just copying a MOBA, then maybe try something different.
Amazon tried with Fruit Ninja last year. I would say just two things. Work on enabling your community because, again, you can't just simply pour in money. You need to also support the people and give them the tools to organize themselves. And then, of course, you need to work with partners. You can't do it alone. There are ESL, there are Valiants, there are, I don't know, tournament. There are so many...
media.
Yes.
The media, please.
Oh, media, of course. You need to talk to the media. You need to talk to the influencer. You need to talk to a whole lot of things and do it as a combined effort.
I think for like production value, those tournaments with huge prize pools are amazing. So those basically bring up the bar on production value of streams and any kind of broadcasting and the media involvement as well. Having a $1 million prize pool to advertise is going to draw people in who haven't even tried the game. And then on a smaller level of actually making an esports game, I think the developer involvement is a huge thing. So you need to enable people to be able to play tournaments. You need to make it as easy and as low entry as possible to actually have a match with your friends and see who's the best at.
Okay. Thank you for all. If you have any question on esports, it's the right time now. You have 5 specialists on this. Over there.
Oh, there we go.
So thanks, guys, for discussion. I was listening to it, and one thing that I was missing, to hear what's all esports about. So the main question was casual gaming and esports. I mean, esports is esports. There is nothing casual about esports. On our platform, we have people training 5 hours a day so they can play, let's say, critical ops in our tournaments. 5 hours a day, that's most than any soccer player in its young age is basically putting into the sport itself. So esports is definitely sport for itself. We are witnessing that, let's say, Clash Royale is putting $250,000 prize pool into the tournaments. They attract 2,000 live views. We do the same with 200 euros tournaments. So basically, one thing that is a common to esports is why people are actually watching it at all. It's because of the entertainment, I think that's the most thing. Critical Ops, I love the game. It's very entertaining to play. As is Vainglory, and that is why it's attracting the audience. Developers can put a lot of money into production, prize pool, and big teams, as we see on an example of Super Evil Megacorp, does not necessarily mean success, because it's a lot of money, and the numbers are just not there to support it. We hope that they do well with it, but there are definitely different approaches how you can do it. From the community, we know when you're watching, let's say, Vainglory casts, they're entertaining, but the talent is missing. So you cannot expect to take any game and make it into esports within a month. On a Critical Ops example, because we are working closely with Critical Force, we had the same numbers for 20 times less of the money that went into the production, and we did it in 2 weeks. And the entertainment is the factor that basically keeps this community going and turning back to the game and making game growing and growing and growing. So basically, yes, you can throw in the money to attract media, to attract brands. Is that the key? Is that the solution? I don't know.
It makes things easier.
It makes things easy, but the essence of esports, it's about entertainment. If you have a game that can entertain the audience, that's the key. If you don't, money, big production teams will not help it.
Thank you. Thank you for Critical Ops promotion also. It's a good partner. Any other question on eSport or media?
I think, unless we maybe perhaps one more, but we're running a little bit behind now, I think, so we might have to wrap it up there.
So interesting.
I'm going to have to say thank you very much there to Chris, Max, Yuri, Simo, and of course Théophile for their very entertaining esports panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.